Now, for our daily cancellation, it's time for another of the fabled reverse cancellations. This is when I am in the midst of being canceled myself, yet I managed to break free, turn the tables, and cancel the cancelers. It's always very exciting. So today I'm canceling those who are trying to cancel me for my take on the Cleveland Indians, who announced that they'll be changing their name because the name Indians is offensive somehow to Indians. Incidentally, the Cleveland Browns lost last night to the Baltimore Ravens on a 55-yard field goal in the final seconds of the game after Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens quarterback, had run back onto the field after missing half of the fourth quarter with cramps that some say was probably code for he had to use the bathroom. Anyway, my point is that I like to think the sports gods were punishing the city of Cleveland for its cowardice. Not that the city of Cleveland really needs to be punished when it comes to sports any more than it already has been over the last several decades. In any case, the Indians will not be the Indians anymore. This news has been celebrated by those on the left who assure us that the Native American community never feels more seen and understood and respected than when all mention of the Native American community is removed from popular culture. Indeed, TMZ reports today that Native American leaders expect that the suicide rate in that community is going to go down because the Cleveland baseball team has chosen a different mascot. I'm not making that up. That is really what is being claimed, that it's going to lower the suicide rate. I briefly mentioned this story about the Cleveland baseball team on the show yesterday. I also mentioned it briefly on Twitter. In both forums, I argued, as I have in the past, that having a team name and a mascot based around Native Americans is no more or less offensive than having one based on any other group, namely the Irish. The Boston Celtics, for example, are called the Boston Celtics, and their mascot is a leprechaun. The Fighting Irish of Notre Dame also have a leprechaun mascot, only theirs is a bit more ornery. This is the point that I posted on Twitter. I said, quoting myself, "I have never heard anyone ever complain about the Boston Celtics and their stereotypical mascot. If Cleveland Indian is offensive, then so is this. But this isn't offensive to anyone with a brain and a shred of emotional maturity, and neither is Cleveland Indian." Now, I must admit, I do deserve to be canceled for this tweet only because of the typo on then. I spelled it T-H-A-N instead of T-H-E-N. Normally, I have a policy of deleting all typo tweets, but I couldn't delete this one because leftists were mad at it for another reason. So I had to choose between preserving my dignity and deleting it because of the typo, or keeping the tweet up in service of triggering the libs. And as George Washington once said, when given a choice between triggering the libs or not triggering them, always trigger them. But much of the outrage, derision, mockery, etc., directed at me is not over the typo, as it should be, but over the point that I'm making. A great many media people, especially sports media, have responded saying, just to summarize here, basically they say, "Oh, you idiot, that's not the same. Besides, leprechauns are fictional characters. Didn't you know that? What, do you think the Boston Celtics is offensive to leprechauns?" Got him. Yes, leprechauns are fictional characters. Okay, then. So you're saying that's okay. So what you're telling me is that it's okay to make a team name out of an ethnic group as long as the mascot is a make-believe creature associated with the traditions and mythologies of that group. That's what you want to go with? Okay, well then, here's my proposal. Let's keep them the Cleveland Indians and make their mascot a character from Native American folklore. The Lakota, for example, believed in forest spirits who were like magical dwarves living in the trees. Kenotilia, they called them. Probably mispronounced it. Is that better? Make them the Indians, but with the magical dwarf as the mascot, sort of like a leprechaun. How's that sound? Would that be okay? Oh, no, that wouldn't be. In fact, that would be even worse, wouldn't it? You'd say it's still a problem because the name is still Indians, and now we've appropriated their cultural mythology and turned it into a mascot, made a joke of it. I've also been told that the Fighting Irish and the Celtics are not offensive because those team names are based on the predominant ethnicity of their fan base, at least historically, right? A lot of Irish people in Boston. Okay, so that's the rule now? A basketball team can make a group, race, or ethnicity into a mascot as long as it's a race or ethnicity common in their fan base? Something tells me this logic would get a sports organization into a lot of trouble if they tried to apply it to virtually anyone but the Irish. The other excuse I've heard is that it's different because Native Americans are a historically persecuted group. Unlike the Irish, who famously have had an enormously easy ride all through history, right? No, of course not. The Irish have been persecuted too, in this country and their own. So that excuse doesn't wash either. See, when you sift through all of the arguments for why it's offensive to make Indians into a team name or a mascot, but not the Irish, you begin to quickly realize that all the arguments are utter hogwash, as the kids would say. Whatever tortured logic makes Indians or Braves offensive must also apply to drunken leprechaun mascots to represent teams with Irish and Celtic in their name. And those on the left, here's the thing, they could quite easily make their point, achieve their desired end, if they simply said, yeah, you're right, that's offensive too, let's get rid of that also. But they won't say that. They can't say that. Because that would be to admit that non-white groups shouldn't get any special consideration, nor do they corner the market on persecution, nor should we have more respect for them than we do any other group. It would be, in other words, to treat all groups equally, which is the last thing that anybody on the left wants to do. But they won't admit that, so they're stuck trying to find differences where none exist and ignore them where they do. For that reason, they are canceled. Not me. I'm only partially canceled for the typo thing, but I'm right about the mascot thing. And let's focus on what I'm right about today and always. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.